Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Hi, welcome to another episode of Release Grief Podcast. Today I'm here with Karis Meier, author of and I totally just butchered that. Redeemed. Did I
Suffering Redeemed.
Suffering Redeemed. Gosh darn it. And I just practiced this before we came on too, and I totally butchered it. She is the author of Suffering Redeemed, and I'm super excited to hear her story on like living with grief daily, because it is more of lifestyle, medical, correct? Is this correct? Am I way off topic?
Yes. No, you're on it.
Can you talk to me a little bit about how long, when did you notice you were in grief while you were in this, this condition? I don't even know what this condition is, but like when you were going through this. Yeah.
So it is interesting. I actually just listened to a previous podcast of yours when you spoke with Unique.
Yes.
So that was interesting. It was like, our stories aren't exactly similar, but they have a lot of similarities in that, my illness kind of was a gradual thing where it was, I thought like, oh, I'm going to get over this. I'll be back to my healthy self. And it didn't go away, and things continually got worse over the years. So it was about 18 years ago is when I initially got sick, and then just kind of developed a lot of different issues and a lot of organ problems basically over the years. And it wasn't until I would say maybe 10 years in when one of my sisters asked me, like, have you been able to grieve about this, about what you have lost through your illness, through all the things that you can't do because of it? And I was like, grieve, or, that's no, like, no, right. I don't, I didn't really, like the common misconception that grief is only for, when someone dies. And
right.
So she gave me this book called Learning to Lament, and it really opened my eyes to kind of realize that I did have a lot of pain that I was holding in and didn't, I didn't think it was really, I don't know. I didn't think I really needed to. I was like, well, I can handle this. It's not as bad as what a lot of people go through in life, kind of minimizing, what I was going through, and probably not wanting to admit how hard it was to myself also. So it was a process, I think, from that point of recognizing it and learning how to process it. I think I'm someone who tends to keep my feelings in a lot, especially negative feelings, things that I think are negative, anger, grief, sadness, whatever. I'm like, right. I just can put on my happy face and it'll all be fine. I don't want to be a burden to other people. I don't want to come across as complaining. And so it was harder than I thought, I think, to really enter into those emotions and to admit to myself and to other people that this was hard. This was not the life that I had planned on. And so it was just, I think from then on, it was a process of learning to live kind of differently.
I was going to say, so when you're going through something like what you've been through, what the Unique has been through, for me, I would assume, and I'm just assuming here, that it would be hard to, like, if you're going through grief, you're like, well, crap, now I have to admit to myself that this is a reality of my life, that I must now move forward with this. And so that's kind of like part of the acceptance stage of grief. It's like, well, shit, here I am. Now what? How long had it been? How long had you been in, like with your medical condition? How long had it been before you got that book? What was the timeline?
10 years.
10 years. So you were living with this condition, and do you mind me asking what the condition was?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. It's part of the hardship in this whole thing is it's not a clear diagnosis. So I initially got a few different parasites overseas, like when I was visiting one of my sisters, actually in Pakistan, and I came home. It's actually on my honeymoon, where I started getting really sick, started losing a lot of weight. And several months later found out it was parasites, and they're the type that can go into different organs and just cause a lot of damage. So I went through all the treatments, did all the antibiotics, but then after that, I never recovered. I never gained my weight back. I never was able to eat a normal diet. I just felt fatigued, sick all the time. And then I started having different issues. So much of our immune system is in our digestive tract. And so after wiping them out with antibiotic after antibiotic, my immunity was just so low. So I picked up everything, and I had liver problems, kidney problems, heart problems, pancreas problems. I mean, I was just in and out of the hospital and on feeding tubes because I wasn't able to retain weight. I wasn't able to digest food. And so, and then I got Lyme disease, was about 6 years ago. And so I started having a lot of nerve pain and neuropathy. And, so yeah, it's just been, it's been quite the journey, because it's not as straightforward. Like, this is what your diagnosis is. Right. This is what you're going to expect. It's more like, what's going to be next. And, how are we going to, and my husband's in the military. So another piece in this is we move around every, 1 to 3 years. And so having to start over with a new doctor and trying to get caught up and have to redo tests. And, so it's complicated. It's not like I can just tell people this is what it is, and they know. It's kind of a, so that makes it, in some ways, that makes it harder, because people don't really, and I don't usually go into it because it's like, I don't really want to, it's just a lot. It's a lot to hear. So.
Yeah, no, I could absolutely imagine starting over every 1 to 3 years with a new doctor, and you're like, great, I have to train a new one in on everything is going on. But hopefully, like with those moves and stuff, you find a doctor that's able to help you and figure a lot of these things out. And I mean, I have hope. I always have for everyone and everything.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So how has this, so I'm assuming here, like with the situation that you're in, how hard has it been to like plan events and stuff and go to like functions and different things? Because I would assume it's going to be very, very difficult to navigate that terrain. Like, okay, well, I can't go here because of this or that, or like worried about infections and worried about getting sick again and stuff like that.
Yeah, it really has. I've had to learn, I think, the hard way. I went back overseas 2 more times after I initially got the parasites, and I got parasites 2 more times after I went. And I love traveling. And so then I realized, okay, my body just is very susceptible. So that's just not something that I can do right now. And then, just in a day-to-day thing, like, so my diet is so limited in what I can eat. So just like social functions, and I still try to do as much as I can, but there's so much revolves around food, and of course, when people don't see you eating, they're like, why aren't you eating? And then, so it's just, even when I don't want to talk about it. Yeah.
That's the biggest one. Don't you like my food? Why do you not like me?
Yeah, I know. So yeah, I think it's a day by day. And some days I have harder days where it's hard to even do much. So I have a huge blessing in all this is I was told in the beginning because of I have a tumor on my pituitary gland that was causing some issues. So I was told that, we wouldn't be able to have any kids, which was devastating. But by miracle of God, we have 4 kids, and I'm thankful for each one of them. But again, that's another thing where I just have to, each day I'm like, okay, God, give me the strength for today, because they all have needs. They're awesome, but kids are a lot of work. And so it's also just, I think that's been one of the hardest is, thinking, how is this going to affect them? How is my illness and not being able to do everything that I want to for them or with them all the time gonna affect their lives? And sometimes when I've been in the hospital or sometimes when they were a few different times when they were babies, I was apart from them for months, and it was or at least weeks, and it was so hard, because I'm like, this is it just breaks my heart as a mom, because I want to be the one that's there for them. And yet I also see how it has really given them so much compassion, so much,
Right.
when you're living with something that is difficult, even for children, they can learn how to show compassion, how to love, how to step in, how to help. And I've really seen, so there's a negative side, but there's also, I think, a blessing in this, where I've really seen how it's been used to really have them develop character and maturity and compassion. So I don't know I don't remember what your question was, but hopefully.
I don't either, but I love the answer. I just think that, like, with kids, they're so adaptable and malleable to what is going on within their life, and the immediate impacts of, like, the immediate family really shapes them into who they are. So I find it fascinating when children come from, the different diverse backgrounds like that. Like your husband's in the military, so that's a big thing. Is he active duty?
Yes.
Yeah. So my husband's was in the military. He was in for 24 years. He was Army Reserves. And deployed a few times, and so that was a very difficult on the children, just with the deployments with the Army Reserve stuff. And then with your husband being active duty, the components that go into active duty, I don't know if you live on post or on base or not, or if you live off, but they still have requirements for, like, family members and stuff like that, correct? To integrate the families and stuff into it, and that has to, I'm sure, be difficult terrain for you, like planning and doing these things and having to continually update these other wives and husbands and stuff with the military stuff. And then the impact on your husband and your children and stuff too. It sounds like you have great support, though, with your family, with your husband and your children.
Yes.
How old are your children?
So 3, 6, 9, 13.
Nice. Oh my gosh, that's a wide range.
Yeah, it is.
It's a wide range.
It is a wide range. I know. I dropped my 3-year-old, he's going to preschool. So 2 weeks ago, it was his first day, and it was the first time in 13 years I didn't have a kid. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, so weird. Like, I don't even know
what am I going to do with all my quiet time?
I know.
I'm not chasing someone.
Yeah.
I can pee in peace.
The little things. Oh my goodness.
It is the little things. It is the little things. So how have your children adapted, like, with the food and stuff that you have to make? Do they have a regular diet, or did the whole family change with you? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I don't make them. sometimes they're like, do I have to eat that, Mom? I'm like, no, you don't have to eat that. Because
No,
when
that's
they look at my food,
specifically for me.
yeah, because a lot of times I have to blend up my food to make it like
Okay.
digestible. And so yeah, it doesn't always look the most appealing. But no,
Right.
I generally make separate food for the family and something similar to me, or something separate for me. But the kids, yeah, I think I mean, they're just so sweet. A few weeks ago, my oldest 13-year-old, came down the stairs and he was like, Mom, I've been praying for you for 2 hours that God would heal you. And he's like, he was just crying. He's just like, I'm so sad. I'm so disappointed. He was just really, really disappointed that, because my kids, throughout, like we're Christians. And so they've always, seen this as a way to like depend upon God. And that's kind of how I see it too, is like,
Right.
God is my strength. God is the one who created me. And but God is also our healer. He created our bodies to heal. And
Mhm.
even though and I have been healed before, my pancreas had been atrophied completely, went to the Mayo Clinic, and when we went there, it was completely healed. And so we've seen God do miracles,
Yeah.
and yet not completely, right? I'm still
Right.
struggling on a daily basis, but just that tension of like living in a world that it's not perfect and our lives are going to be hard, but we always have a choice of how to respond, right? we
Right.
we don't often get to choose what happens to us. I mean, yeah, we have choices that will play into it, but a lot of things happen to us and we can't, we can't stop it. It's just there's we live in a painful and difficult world, and we all will suffering is going to come in one way or the other. So
Right.
how are we going to respond? And I think, for me, I think the biggest thing with my children is just trying to teach them like, okay, so every day I have a choice when I wake up in pain, and if I haven't slept, how am I going to choose to respond to this day?
Yeah.
And I can grumble and complain, and be depressed and sad and mopey, or I can choose to focus on the good gifts that I do have. And there are a lot of them that I have to be thankful for. And so just a continual opportunity to live an example for my children.
Oh, that is beautiful. I think that doesn't just apply to children, that applies to everyone. Like when you wake up, how do you choose to do your day? How do you choose what do you want to
Mhm.
respond to and what do you want to react to? Because
Yeah.
that's a choice that we get to make and only we get to make that, no one else can make that for us. I mean, theoretically, no one can make that for us.
Right.
But
Yeah. I was,
who knows what happens with the world, and all the things. But
yeah.
that is beautiful that you're choosing in the morning to wake up and choose the good aspects of everything and showing them that even though, yeah, things are hard, things are tough, things are rough, but you don't have to go down that path. You can choose happiness and joy and looking on the brighter side to everything. That's beautiful.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's beautiful. And that's got to trickle down to all the children too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a good balance of that. And then also, because like I said, for so many years in the beginning, I just kept my negative feelings in my inside and didn't feel
Mhm.
like I could express them. I felt like it was I'm not sure. I'm not sure why, of all the reasons, but um learning to, like, so right now my husband's in Germany for a while and the kids have just been sad, so I'm like,
Mhm.
it's okay to cry. You don't have to pretend to be happy. We're sad because dad is gone, so it's okay, let's be sad. That's a good reaction to have when someone that you love is gone. But then let's not stay sad. Let's do something fun. Let's go to McDonald's. So,
Yeah.
like yesterday, we went to McDonald's and played and got ice cream. And um, so I think it's such a balance of like not like just pretending. We can't just pretend
Right.
everything's okay. It's a choice, like you said. But just learning how to balance the emotions, the roller coaster of emotions that we um could live by, I guess.
Yes. I remember after Cassandra passed and then after my granddaughter passed, the emotions were easier after my granddaughter passed, because
Mm,
I'd already expressed a lot of them when my daughter passed. And so it was, I mean, they were still rough. It was still extremely difficult to go through them. But the first time I felt I had to like stay strong for the kids, for my family, for my husband, and just put on this face that
mm,
everything was okay and that everything would be okay. And while, everything would be okay eventually, it was tough at that moment. Because I think for me, when I started expressing those emotions, it made everything real. It made everything
yeah.
real, and I couldn't put it back. And once you open that Pandora's box of emotions, it's like, how do you shove that stuff back in? How do you stop the floodgates from happening? And the truth is, you can't.
Yeah.
But it helps so much moving forward and to help my children, because they thought that they had to be strong in front of me. They thought that they couldn't break down in front of me, and they were. And so we lost Cassandra in 16. Um, and so our youngest daughter was 12. And so
Mm,
she didn't properly like learn how to express emotions or thought that she couldn't be, sad around us or whatever. Even though
mm,
we did talk about, well, we talk about her all the time. Like it's a normal conversation piece for us. It's like, oh, I wonder what Cassandra would have thought. Or, she would have been, 26 years old now instead of 19. She's forever
mm,
19 with us, but she would have been 26. And it's just the hard parts of it, like being the strong and staying firm. And then when my granddaughter passed a couple years ago, in 2021, she was 4. So she will forever be 4 in our minds.
mm,
But like the emotions of it now, it's like, okay, we can talk about it more. And now we have other grandchildren, like she had siblings and stuff. So we talk about it with them and try to just open those gates so that they don't feel like they have to be a certain way. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Are we trying? 100%.
yeah.
Because there's times like
Yeah.
I just don't want to cry. Like, no, I refuse to
Mm,
cry today. And all
yeah.
these
Yeah.
things. It's just like, I don't have time to go through these emotions right now. Can we
Yeah.
just put this all for tomorrow?
I
But
hear
life
ya.
just doesn't work that way.
So inconvenient when they show up. Oh.
The wind is blowing. It's time to cry. I'm like, no, I don't want to. And so I can imagine like with the kids and stuff, like putting on the brave face because you don't want them to see you hurting all the time or see you in
Yeah.
pain
Yeah.
and see you in all that stuff. But
Hmm.
I love the fact that you're showing them that even if you are hurting, you can, be in pain and still choose, to look at it a different way, acknowledging it and responding to it a different way. So that I find that absolutely
Hmm.
beautiful. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of people need to do this more. Because otherwise I think you become bitter. If you hold it all in,
Oh
you
yeah.
become bitter and you
Oh
become
yes.
angry at life for giving you and dealing you this hand and
Yeah.
all the things that you thought that you were going to be when you were in kindergarten. And they asked you that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? No, that infamous question. And as kindergartners, they have no idea. No idea.
Right.
And they're like, oh, if I could go back, it sure wouldn't be this.
Hmm. Hmm.
So talk to me about your book. Because you wrote your book. Was it all about your story leading up to this? Um, Tell me about it.
Well, it was not my idea. I never thought I would write a book. It wasn't really something that, I mean, I've always enjoyed writing, but
Mhm.
so about 6 years ago, I started having these nerve problems where I actually, to the point where I couldn't walk for a while. So
Mhm.
I was in the hospital and just very low point for me. Kind of like, I don't know if I can go on, like this is too hard. Like one more thing, I often thought like, if one more thing happens, I don't know how I can do it.
Right.
And when this hit, my husband was in a job where he was gone more than he was home, and we had 3 kids at that point, and then I was in the hospital, and it was really hard. It was a very hard time, and I remember waking up one night and just really had this strong thought, which I think it was from God, but just to start writing. And I was like, writing about what? What am I going to write about? How depressed I am right now. But after a couple of weeks, I started just processing what I was going through internally, processing how God was speaking to me, how I was continuing to go on each day, what I was gaining, even seeing the good purposes that was coming out of my suffering, and processing a lot of pain, processing a lot of feelings that I hadn't processed over the years. So it was very, I would say it's very therapeutic for me. It opened up a lot of doors that I didn't even realize were there inside of me. And it also opened up doors for me to reach out to other people, because because of moving around so much, I've met a lot of people. I know a lot of people who are going through a lot of hard things, wives who have lost husbands or have husbands who are now injured, or, so I started a Facebook group called Suffering Well, and then I started a blog, and then, again, just kind of sharing personal things, but also just in a way to bring hope and to bring courage and encouragement. And then at the beginning of 2022, I really felt like I should use a lot of that content that I'd written over the years and put it into a book. So it was things I probably would not have written had I known it was going to be made public. And so in that way, it was a little hard. It was humbling in a lot of ways, because I think a lot of times when I'd written, I was at my worst, and but it was good. I think it really, because of that vulnerability, and this is what I've heard from other people, is just that they can really connect, because I think sometimes when we try to come across to other people, we try to sound good or have, sound like, if we come on the other side of something, it's easy to say, oh, I've made it. I'm past it, listen to what I've been through, and I'm on the other side. And, so I'm not there yet, but it's a process. So I process a lot about, what our purpose is in suffering, and how do we live with expectation of good, but also being surrendered and living at peace at where we're at, and also for me, it was a lot of like learning how to depend upon God and intimacy with God in affliction, and what does it look like to suffer well? What does that look like? I think we live in a culture, I think the modern Western culture doesn't really prepare us to suffer well.
No.
There's so many other cultures, other places where I've lived, where suffering is expected. It's part of life. And they teach the citizen, they teach the people how to embrace suffering, how to live through it, what good comes out of suffering, because there are good things that can come out of it. Right. But we live in a culture where it's just like, no, do everything you can to avoid suffering. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it. Try to escape it. And then, blinders on, and that does not help us at all. And so we need to realize that no, we're not immune to it just because we live in the United States. It's gonna, it might look different. But that's, so I just really dig into it, and it's just real. It's real. It's real in my life. It's real in everyone's lives, to different scales, of course, in different ways. But that's kind of what it's about.
No, I love it, because I've mentioned this multiple times, is that I feel like in life that we go from one trauma point or grief point or situation to the next situation with moments of beautifulness in between, because we're constantly we were made to suffer from the moment we were born. Like this is the life that we have.
And when I've said it before, like when we shy away from it, when we just put our blinders, like I went so far as I want to host like a conference that helps people plan their own funeral so that the people coming after them, are not stuck with, okay, well, now what? Now what? What do I do here? How do I plan this? What do I do that? And just removing some of that, because we don't talk about death enough. We don't talk about what's going to happen after that person passes. I mean, obviously we don't expect young people to pass. We expect it to be reserved just for the elderly, just for the people who've lived an amazing, wonderful, full life, but that's not our reality. We experience grief and death throughout our entire lives, and I agree, it's not. I wish there was more talking about it. I wish there was more like people embracing it instead of just sticking their head in the sand and being like, no, I'll talk about that tomorrow. It's not on my doorstep yet, until it gets on their doorstep. And then they're like, oh crap, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Now, how do I deal with this? Now, what's going to happen? This is too much. I can't bear it. Because suicide rates are skyrocketing. Like it's going insane. And I think it's just a matter of equipping each other with the knowledge that it's like, this is a natural part of life. We were born to die. Like, we have to. It has to happen.
Yeah.
And we will all go through it at some point in time. But I don't know. Like you said, I feel like we think we're immune to it over here and we're going to live forever. And I'm like, I don't want that.
No.
Forever. That would be so painful to see everyone and everything that just pass away and you're still going on. I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah, no.
But do you have these open conversations with your children and stuff like that as well?
Yes. Yeah, we definitely have had a lot of hard conversations and hard and good, about how what do we do when we face these hard things in life, and just trying to be very open and honest about suffering and struggling, and of course, like, balancing that, where they're at and what they can handle, but it's but I think there is a way. I think there's so much fear that so for me, it's really interesting because I grew up, I remember as a kid, I had a lot of fear in my life, and it was specifically about death and disease. And so it's so interesting that I am now living this life where in the first several years of illness, I was in so much fear because I was like, my worst nightmare is happening to me. I'm living these things that I worried about my entire life, and now it's come upon me, and yet in a way I can see it, how it's good, because it really made me face those fears, face disease, face, sickness and suffering and pain, and even, the death that will eventually come. But I think when you're kind of forced to face those things, then they're not as scary anymore, because you're like, okay, this is what is happening. And again, it's a choice, right? And if I can understand it, and I can face my fears and not let them conquer me, I can be in control of it. It's not gonna take up all my attention and time. And so I've really seen over the years how I've been able to grow out of that fear and live in more freedom. And also, again, like, just be able to talk to my kids about those things too, because I think there's so much in life that we can cower in fear about, I mean, there's so many different things we could do, but when you really face those fears and choose to live above them, then there's so much joy and freedom that come.
There is. It doesn't take up the bandwidth in your mind anymore. It's now open to for other things, the beauty and the wonder of the world. I'm amazed every day. I look outside and see the trees. Right now we're heading into fall, and the trees are losing their leaves, and they're turning these beautiful, brilliant colors of yellow. orange and red, and going through the process of death,
Yeah.
cycling through it
Yeah.
again. And I heard that there was a study, I think it was in California, that they had these trees and they kept them in bloom all the time. They didn't let them go into the cycle of like death, if you will, and go through that
Mm.
process. And the trees themselves died within a year because they
Wow.
weren't able to go through those processes. And so
Mm.
these are the natural processes of life. We go into like, gosh dang it, like a hibernation kind of thing where we go into
Mhm.
like a growth period, a stagnant period, and then all of a sudden we bloom in the spring, like the trees bloom in the spring and we go through that blossom. That's a growth phase. And then we go dormant again, and then we go growth and dormant. And I think that that is reminiscent of life as well. And so when I look out and I see all this beautiful wonder around me, it's like they just know what to do. They know what to do.
Mm.
Everything is connected. And like you mentioned earlier, in Western society here in the US, specifically in the US, um, it's almost like it's been commercialized so much
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
that we just shy away from everything. Like it's so commercialized. Buy
Yeah.
a casket for $10,000. Do this, get a memorial. Like pay all this money when it doesn't have to be this big hullabaloo for like a funeral or a
Mhm.
death or anything like that. It can be this beautiful intimate piece where you're
Mhm.
transitioning and helping them transition into the next world, the next life, the next whatever you believe in, right? My
Mhm.
thoughts on that
Mhm.
anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. That's beautiful. I love that illustration of trees. I often think of that in the fall when the trees are falling, or when the leaves are falling off, and especially when it's kind of like ugly and you're like, oh no. But
Right.
I'm like, but it's bringing new life, and that's so true in our lives too. Like I think when you're going through something hard, suffering or struggling or hardship, like it's kind of a pruning time where it suffering often brings out the worst in us, right? It can, like
Mhm.
when we're tired or sick or going through something, we can the yucky stuff kind of comes out, but
Yeah.
it also can give us opportunity to grow and to mature and to grow in character and to grow in strength, and so much beauty can come from it.
Right.
I was just thinking of I just was reading Viktor Frankl's book, and just about how so he lived through the concentration camps, and just it's amazing. It's an amazing book, but just he was talking about how circumstances don't make us who we are, but they reveal who we are, right? So we we don't they oftentimes when we're going through something, whatever is inside is going to kind of come
Right.
out, and
Mhm.
then we have to say, okay, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to be able to kind of transform into something more beautiful, or like you said earlier, we can become bitter, we can become hard, and we can become angry. And so a lot of it is, again, yeah, how are we going to respond to this? And
Yeah. It's all a
so
choice. We all get to choose.
mhm,
And
mhm,
a lot of times we just go back to what we've known, like what we've ingested. So like if we're ingesting ways to make us better and ways to lift our life and ways for all these things, like really internalize it, not just do it for the sake of doing it, but like really internalizing it and using it to change who we are, to become that better person, that, just a 1% change every day. Then I think it, because not if, but when bad things happen or instances happen, I shouldn't say bad things because there's good that comes from them too. But when things happen that challenge us, we have a better way to respond to it, more
yeah,
access, more knowledge, more ideas on how to respond to it instead of just, you know, the ways previously to learning whatever it was that we learned. So I'm a
mhm,
big proponent of feeding your mind because I think that
yes,
that is the key. So I delve in business a lot because
mm,
the business world, it's so great. And it's a lot of mindset work that you have to do when you're an online business owner. So you're constantly teaching your mind different ways to be better, different, like, it's almost like releasing some of that trauma that you've experienced as a child and you're bringing it in. You know how we just normally, everyone has trauma, everyone has childhood trauma, and you bring it into your life. And usually you just like throw it on the other person that you're married to or dealing with, or a business partner or whatever. But instead you're like trying to heal your own trauma to become a better person, so that you're not like just throwing it on everyone, and you're just like dealing with it and pushing it out and releasing it and finding the next set of trauma to, moving from
Mm.
stair to stair of trauma, and one of the key components that I remember forever, someone told me, was the obstacle is the way. And so if,
Mm.
like you mentioned earlier, it was the fear of being sick and all those things that was coming, like you had to, that was the obstacle. And the way through it was to deal with it. And to me, that has been one of the most valuable pieces of information that I've ever had, that it was ever given to me, was the obstacle is the way. So if there's something I'm fearing, something that I'm avoiding, something that I don't want to, talk about or whatever, then that is actually what I need to be doing
Mm-hmm.
for
That's
facing all
beautiful.
of those things.
Yeah.
So
The
just
obstacle
my
is the
random
way.
tidbits.
No, that's good. I like it. I like it.
So, do you have, so closing up on this, do you have anything else you'd love for the listeners to know? Any words of wisdom that they can take with them?
Oh, so many
She's
things.
like, where do I begin?
Oh, yeah. So I I think, for me, so much of it is going back to so again, for me, my faith was really a foundation of being able to have hope. And I know you mentioned at the beginning, like you always have hope for situations. And I think that is such a
Ew.
key component of having purpose and having hope in our lives. And that may look different for different people, which
Right.
is completely fine. But I know for me, if I didn't have that hope where I woke up every morning and had the hope, for me, a lot of it is just having hope in God and having hope of eternal life, of something that is beyond this world. And then also having a purpose of living. Because I think when we're whether you're grieving over someone dying, or living with chronic illness, or going through some other hardship in your life, it can become so big. It can become like this giant that's in front of you that feels like it's never gonna, you're never gonna be able to overcome it.
Right.
And I think it can even become like an idol, like where it's just so strong in presence that you can't look past it to anything else. And yet I think, yeah, there is a way to get past that, not like skipping over it or trying to ignore it, but through it, right? It's the through it that we're able to become overcomers. And then it's so beautiful to hear how, losing your child and your grandchild, and just how it's opened up the way for you to reach out and to touch so many lives because of that. And that's really how I feel like my life has opened up too. It's through struggle that has opened up a way to connect and to have purpose and to reach other people. And everyone has that in their lives. It's going to look different, but we all have that opportunity. And so just, yeah, don't give in, don't give up. There is always hope. And there's so many people that want to help and who want to be there. You don't have to suffer alone. You don't have to struggle alone. You don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, I love that. That is, yes, spot on. I think that once you lose hope, and once you lose like a reason to keep going, then that's when you've been beaten.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. And each day is a chance to get back up and start again and choose a different path or choose something different, to potentially get you closer to where it is, or knowledge or something. I always say, when I scroll on social media, because we all do the scroll. It sucks, but we do it, right? And I tell myself when I'm scrolling, like I always find this piece of information that is almost like something I've been searching for, but I didn't know it until I found it. And then I'm done for the day. I'm done scrolling. I'm like, okay, I found it. I'm good to go. This is what I needed for the day. Boom. And then I'm off. And I'm like, okay, that raised my level of knowledge, my level of being able to provide more for myself, like my mindset and feed my mind and all those things to help my family or whatever it was, the tidbit of knowledge, whatever it was. That was the piece that I had been searching for, but didn't realize I was searching for it. Does that sound crazy?
No, that's great. That's it. That's like you have an objective and then you leave feeling fulfilled. That's perfect.
I do, yeah.
That's what it should. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes me a couple minutes and sometimes it takes me, like 30 minutes to an hour or whatever, but then I try not to sit there and do the endless scroll on social media because that just takes away your time and all that stuff. And it's generally not great,
No.
It's not feeding your mind in the best possible ways.
True.
Well, I thank you so much for being a guest on this episode, and I look forward to all the people that this episode will touch in the future. And thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful
Thanks for having
day.
me.
See you in the next episode.
Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.